Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Wadka, the co-host, teacher at Socialist and Ellipson, a community organizer Socialist Camiseta, and writing teacher Jessica. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find the link to our blog in the episode notes. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode where you found this episode. Thank you. So, today's topic, we will be discussing the Sino or the China and Russian Alliance after their historic meeting in Beijing, right, for the Winter Olympics, and the implications of it, as well as just how much of this is related to the Ukraine war or the war in Ukraine, right, and the call for U.S. efforts to minimize that alliance. And Andy, you had come up with a topic. You emailed something for us to read. So maybe you can start off the episode and then have us share our initial reactions to this pact.
Yeah. So I will probably try to find a link for this thing that people can get to. The link that I sent you all was I guess a link from Russia, which now people are having trouble getting to. But it's basically, the title of it is a joint statement of the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China on the international relations entering a new era and the global sustainable development. And I saw it actually mentioned on the Hill. Kim Iversen did like her editorial about it, and I think she had the right understanding, at least of the document, that it was a document of collaboration, of real intent, and even a much more sincere collaboration, establishing collaboration between Russia and China. The other people on the show did not seem to understand, in my opinion, the importance of the document. And there's a few things that have come up. Like, first, like when I do want to say, like, because I had I sent two documents to both of you. I sent you this, and I sent you the national strategy. What's that damn thing called?
National Defense Strategy.
The National Defense Strategy from 2018, and because this to me is the answer of Russia and China to the National Defense Strategy put out by the United States in 2018, and I think there's a reason why it took them so long to do it. And there was an article in Daily Mail today that was talking about how, because there's been this question in the mainstream press of, like, is China going to take Russia's side? Are they going to see reason and come and go with the West? And I always thought that was like, that's crazy. They're even saying that, because there's no way China's going to take NATO or US's side on this, because they know what the US is about. But that came out today or in the last few days where decisively Russia or China has said, no, we're not. We think the problem here is NATO. We don't think the problem here is Russia. We think the problem here is NATO. And they're the ones who have been stoking the violence and the aggression. And Russia has the right to its own security, right? And while still trying to play, China's still trying to play a game of, like, arbiter. And I'll even talk about what I think is going on there. So this is what the Daily Mail said about this. They said, once bitter Cold War rivals, they're talking about China and Russia have moved closer than ever since President Xi Jinping took power nearly a decade ago, driven by their shared desire to confront US power. And that is a very interesting way of putting that, because in 2018, like I've said over and over again on so many different episodes, the U.S. essentially declared war on both of these two. And that's what's in the National Strategy document, basically saying the war on terror is over. And from here on in, all our military, the thrust of our military is going to be towards taking on China and taking on Russia, what they described as the revisionist powers. And China and Russia haven't said anything about that, but now they are saying something about that. And I think it's very interesting. And I think it also speaks to this notion. And I'll have to say, I saw a Corbett report thing about this document that I thought was completely, really off the mark in terms of how it assessed it, because it assessed it as like, look at these globalists all trying to do the same thing. And it's like, no, you're missing the point. what this shows is the world is being divided. And that's how imperialism works. And the language of these people is not about globalism. The language of these people is the language of empire building. And that's what is so clear in this document for me, is that they are using US language to say, this is China now, in my opinion, to say, we're prepared to take over the mantle that the US had after World War II, and we can run this fucking show better. Not less violent, not less lying, but just we'll do a better job of it. And that's interesting to me. So that's my initial take on some of the elements of this document. And I wanted you all to read it because I also know that I'm not, questions about competitive world versus collaborative world at the top, New World Order kind of stuff. And I wanted to see what you made of this document, because what I see in it, a world being split in two, and preparing for brutal conflict. And I wanted to see if other people saw other things. So that's my opening statements, I guess, about it.
Yeah, it was really interesting reading these side by side for sure. But yeah, I mean, with regard to the China-Russia piece, I mean, the majority of the document to me, it was all advocating for a multipolar world. It was advocating for cooperation, like multinational development, allegedly for the purpose of helping people, reducing poverty, right? Like things that we want, food security, some other stuff, right? A lot of mention of COVID-19. It came up quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely moments for me, and I haven't listened to the Corbett piece on this, so I'll have to check it out. But there were definitely moments where the kind of globalist stuff, I felt myself, a little triggered by, mentions of like sustainable development goals and a lot of this. But I think you're right in the sense that in a lot of places, they really kind of take like U.S. democratic, slammed my heart into my table. Like they take the language of U.S. democracy and kind of, like they'll put it in quotation marks. Maybe we can look at some examples, but kind of turning it against the West, right, in really accurate ways, right? Talking about how democracy is not a particularly American thing, if an American thing at all, right? Like it's an international goal. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. There's definitely a couple like more specific things that I definitely want to bring up, but my sense of it, especially reading it as kind of a response, as you described it in your framing, Andy. Yeah, I mean, it was the total opposite of the defense piece, which was all like unilateral, just same old stuff. There was even, there was a line in the National Defense Strategy where they literally say, we will not seek to impose our way of life by force. And yet the entire document is about exactly that, like imposing our way of life by force, and specifically calling out Russia and China in particular again and again and again. And every critique is just so backwards, because every critique, whether it's nuclear energy or trying to wage economic warfare through sanctions or control international trade, like US is guilty of every single one of those critiques. So yeah, I mean, to me, like, especially by contrast, like it read, at least on the surface level, as a much better plan for geopolitics moving forward. Yeah, like I said, at the surface level, I think.
So yeah, I also had difficulties putting it up again. I read it a while back, but I read the National Defense Strategy today. So it reminded me of that document, the joint statement, because at least to me, it's a page out of the U.S. playbook. Basically, like, the joint statement calls out the U.S. straight up while masking their own intentions. Because I see what you're saying, Jessica, that they're talking about multipolar world. They call out the US's use of force and violence to effect change in the world, and so I think the most of the world knows this. That the U.S. is brutal. The U.S. will get their way, and I do think that it is a sort of statement. It's kind of bold, I think, to me, in the sense of they're saying, like, you know what, that time is over. It's like that time, the U.S. hegemony over the world, unchallenged hegemony, is over, and us too. We're gonna make sure that that world is no more. And then I find it so curious that it came about a month before Ukraine. And so this is what they display to the world, right? But they know, they have in the background, they know what they're doing, they know their plans, they know their strategy. This is the strategy that they want us to see, they want us to consume. But I personally, I don't like it proves what we've been saying, at least to me. Obviously I'm biased, because Lipson and I see the world that, in that sense, at least, of these are thugs, these are mobsters, all these ruling classes. We're not picking Russia or China or the US. They're all competing. That's the order of the world under capitalism, and cooperation is an illusion, and it will break down, especially when the thugs want to feast. I was actually thinking of these moments in terms of a mobster movie, when the small mobsters see the big boss about to go down and feel the winds of change, they make their move, to take more power. And I think this actually relates a bit to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because that was a defeat. I know there are some people that listen to us and are suspicious as the US, they're plotting something. I think it was a defeat. They didn't, they don't, and so NATO was retreating, and now NATO also has to have a new function. And I do think the US is making moves, NATO is making moves. They forced the hand of Russia to an extent, but Russia and China feel secure enough to make that Ukraine move. And now throw into this conversation another wrench, or another more spice into this conflict at Saudi Arabia. Over the last week, Saudi Arabia, and has publicly considered taking the Chinese currency as a method of payment, bypassing the US dollar. That's a massive, bold move that challenges the US economic hegemony in the world. It may not pan out immediately, but again, there's even articles now coming out. I read one from the Dallas News talking about they're using the language of the US security states to talk about this moment. I think the triage of oil, something like that, right? Like the troika of evil, or they have phrases to talk about, Iran, to talk about Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea. And so this article that I was reading was talking about how the US needs to break down this alliance of Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China. Of course, it's about petroleum, but it's about markets. It's about the world currency. It's about trade. It's about military, in a military alliance as well, because these are superpowers. The US would really have to consider, if they wanted to take on one of these head on. Because in Saudi Arabia too, like, they're not dumb. Like, we paint them as like these backwards people in media, but long story short, my impressions is that this is a declaration of war. And if you really go back to that 2018 defense strategy thing, you also see there the last 2 years of COVID, why it is so important, what we've been saying. That they're talking about biotechnology, artificial intelligence, big data analytics. This is the US defense strategy, right? Like they stated it publicly in relation to China and Russia and Iran and everyone. They did focus on China and Russia, but they also named all the other people that have been shoved in our under our throats in the last 5, 6, 10 years. North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, all these evil people, the Islamic State, that they've used to advance the imperial project in this. So again, these two statements are absolutely a declaration of war. And I do see, like Lipson, a partition of the world happening now. And this is the precursor to World War III in my mind.
Well, the Saudi Arabia thing, that was also on my radar as something I saw. Just to comment on, to expand, to piggyback on what Kenny was saying, I was listening to Alfred McCoy, who is a professor in history, and I'm hoping to share a clip later on in this episode. And it really is something. He talks about, that professor talks about world hegemonies, really the rise and fall of it. He's a historian, and he says that we are at a time, at a pivotal time right now, that we are witnessing, and the 4th of February is that historic period, or that is date that is shift that will always remember, because ever since then, since that agreement, there have been conversations, and it's how the dollar really is a marker for how you're going to be, what position you are in the world. And now that Saudi Arabia is doing that, announcing that their petroleum transactions would be changing from dollars now to the yuan, that is now a sign that that we're going to be changing. And it's doing oil business in dollars, and that means that the dollar has continued support of the global reserve currency. But it's going to change in the future. It's going to be a part of China now, right? Why wouldn't it be? This is Cold War 2.0, right? There is first of all, Cold War is the term coined, or I don't know if it was coined, but it was used first time by George Orwell, right? It was in an article that he published in 1945, and it was, as I'll read it here, an article published that he predicted there would be a nuclear statement between 2 or 3 monstrous superstates, each possessed of a weapon by which millions of people can be wiped out in a few seconds. So this is what I think we're really looking at. The next coming years will look like is we're going to be in this conflictive zone between the world powers. This is at the heels of the President Biden calling China on Friday, that allegedly 2-hour conversation, right? And trying to dissuade China from aligning themselves with Russia. And now this week, visiting Europe, starting I think in Poland. I'm not sure exactly where, but that's what's going to happen. So it's all of the decline of the power, the U.S. power that we're seeing. And I can say more about it later. I just also wanted to say that this is not the first time there was an agreement or a treaty between Beijing and Moscow. There have been also previous agreements. There is the Treaty of Friendship of 2001, which which just shows, right, like there has been this ongoing conversation that's been going on. And once we look at Alfred McCoy, I'll get this historian that I'll share, he argues that it takes a plague or a war for this tectonic shift. And whether the plague, whether COVID was manufactured or it happened naturally, whatever it was, whatever theoretically people want to assume how it happened, it's been COVID and now the Ukrainian war, right? that have been sort of propelled this tectonic shift that we are seeing now. And I think that this is going to be a shift in, as we have seen in that agreement, beyond security. This is going to be a collaboration on space, climate change, the internet, and artificial intelligence, if you look at that agreement. And this is going to be, as the document claims, a change in the way that we see democracy, right? And as we move away from seeing the center of the world, which is the USA at this moment, to now seeing how Asia and Russia are going to be dominating our culture and the way that we view whatever democracy is, right? I mean, I'm not saying we have democracy, but and that is going to be, because they say it right there, they claim that no one size fits all type of democracy. So I do see that there's going to be a shift in the way that we think about the way governments work. And then it shows, right, if we continue the agreement, it shows elaborate show of solidarity than any time in the past. And they have a pledge to stand shoulder to shoulder against the USA and the West, ideologically as well as militarily. And so, I mean, these are thoughts, the initial thoughts, right? So I'm concerned. I'm actually quite, I'm just very, I'm glad you brought it up, Andy, because it really makes me nervous. I did some reading today, and it really is now, I can't believe we're in the start, in the very, this is history. This year is the start of this tectonic shift. And again, once we listen to Alfred McCoy, I'm going to share a clip of him. He is predicting that there's going to, the USA is going to be eclipsed by Eurasia by 2030. And China will be the rise of power by 2050. I mean, these are interesting predictions that he is making, and I want to share that, right? But why wouldn't it be? I mean, if we see how after World War II, there was the Marshall Plan, right, to create infrastructure across Europe to try to get it more economically boosted, and as well as to get the Industrial Revolution going. I think it was the third Industrial Revolution going. And now we're seeing how China is placing itself as that center, as it's, I forget what they call it, but the alliance of all the Africa and Asia alliance in creating that infrastructure that was once done by the US Empire after World War II. So if we just look at history, we can map it onto this future, and we can see how there is this shift. And why wouldn't it be, right? I mean, I think it's 70% landmass of Asia is ruled by China, right? And it's huge. So we're going to be moving away now from the center, you know.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned the part of the document that I didn't want to ignore, which was the AI, the internet, the collaboration on the data collection that is being put forward by Russia and China, like openly. Like, we're going to be competing. We're going to be collaborating on building artificial intelligence and data collection systems that will defeat you. That's what they're. I mean, and we're going to be working with our partners, the Shanghai Pact, ASEAN, the American Southeast Asian committees, APEC. Some of those organizations have the United States in them, but the Shanghai Pact, which is essentially like Asian NATO, U.S. tried to get into that Shanghai Pact back in 2005, and they said, "Fuck you! You're invading one of our group members of the Shanghai Pact. You're not allowed to be even an observer into it." And now they're putting forward the Shanghai Pact. I can't remember what their name was for it. I think it was the Shanghai Cooperative Organization as the framework for really the new order. And the new order is the same language and buzzwords that the U.S. has put forward to establish that its order is going to rule. And that's what Jessica was mentioning. I do want to actually read it out because it's quite remarkable how similar they sound when they put forward, when China puts forward its plan for running a wonderful world, how much it sounds like the U.S. And I think the NWO people think, oh, they must be collaborating. Idiots, they're not collaborating. They're using the same lie language to say we're gonna run this show. Okay, so here's what they say, right? And this is China. In China and Russia, in order to accelerate the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the sides call on the international community to take practical steps in the key areas of cooperation, such as poverty reduction, food security, vaccines, epidemic control, financing for development, climate change, sustainable development, including green development, industrialization, digital economy, and infrastructure connectivity. Like, this is not serious. These people are basically saying, we will rule the world. We're taking this world from the United States. And that's why it was important for them to say, we are the ones who are going to reestablish the post-World War II order. That's where you start to see what this is really about. The post-World War II order is the heyday of capitalist democracy. It's when money was, it was the recovery from all that, the establishment of Western democracies. Of course, even after World War II, there was the establishment of so-called communist China, which in my opinion was never communist, and certainly not today. But what they mean, though, is that order of democracy spreading, that is threatened now. This is what China is implying. That is threatened now by an aggressive state that only considers its own interests. So what they're essentially saying is, we are the new allies, and the Axis powers of the United States. They're the threat to the global security. They're the threat to democracy. They're not saying a new kind of democracy. They're saying the same old democracy that everyone calls dictatorship because it is dictatorship. It just, when China does its democracy, the US calls it dictatorship. When the US does its democracy, China calls it authoritarian. And they're both right, because they're all dictatorships. All of them are veneers of things that are good for people, when both of them are committed to smashing their own working classes, accumulating profits from them, and using the surplus value of those profits to rebuild their engines of competition and war and try to win. So that's what I see. That's what, to me, is so striking in this. And it is, I will also cite one other part that was interesting to me about, and when Jessica, you mentioned the idea of one of these sounds like one of these might be a better plan. I will say these are both the same plans. It's just that I would say that China is trying to say to the rest of the world, the US is going to lose this one. We've already got our inroads into Africa. We've already built our inroads into Europe. We're where the money is. The Belt and Road Initiative is where investment dollars are, not the US. So if you want to be on the winning team, come over to our side. That's really what this thing is trying to say to everyone else on the globe. And there was, I just want to cite one part from the national security document, because it did highlight to me something interesting that indicates the US strategy in Ukraine. And they said this in their document. This is in the 2018 document. So they were talking about how they were going to be, the US is talking about how they're going to be successful in challenging China and Russia. And they said, we're going to have to be strategically predictable, but operationally unpredictable. And they go say this: deterring or defeating long-term strategic competitors is a fundamentally different challenge than the regional adversaries that were the focus of previous strategies. Our strength and integrated actions with allies will demonstrate our commitment to deterring aggression, but our dynamic force employment, military posture, and operations must introduce unpredictability to adversary decision makers. With our allies and partners, we will challenge competitors by maneuvering them into unfavorable positions, frustrating their efforts, precluding their options while expanding our own, and forcing them to confront conflict under adverse conditions. That's what I think the US strategy is here in Ukraine. It's forcing, they knew they were going to be fighting two wars. They can't fight them at the same time. They don't want to make the mistake that Germany made. Okay, we're going to fight the Soviet forces on one side, we're going to fight Britain and the other forces on the other side. They don't want to fight two wars at once, so they have to fight them one at a time. And I believe that the Ukraine strategy was a strategy, and the US strategy to draw Russia into Ukraine and force their hand by pushing NATO into Ukraine was one to try to bring this conflict on so they could bleed Russia in a dirty war, essentially, where the US gets to use Javelin missiles and Stinger missiles and all that kind of stuff, pumping weapons in there to see if they can weaken one of their competitors. There's a risk with it because it has pushed them decisively into China's arms now, and I think China knows that, and Russia knows that, because clearly Russia is the junior partner to this alliance. But I do think there is not, the US is not mad and not crazy when they're doing what they're doing. They're doing exactly that, being operationally unpredictable and trying to draw their enemies into making mistakes that they can make them pay for.
I do wonder, what kind of moves are going to happen after this, right? Like the Ukraine situation, because there are people like we've had at this show that make the new world order type of argument, right? Like there is this overarching power structure that dictates everything in the world, and and we, I guess, say essentially that these are all mobsters representing their own ruling class, and they have to go to war. Eventually, it evolves into that. World War I, World War II was about that, and so again, there is the argument that these countries have economic ties, right? For me, it's like the globalization argument, right? Like that more economic ties is going to deter people from going to war. But China itself is undergoing a change in strategy, right? Because they are going to have to switch from the factory of the world, and this is what they're getting into Africa, because Africa will be the factory of the world. Well, the Chinese, ruling the world, like the U.S., right, controlling the financial markets of the world, they're going to be able to have their own consumers. They don't have to sell to the rest of the world. They have plenty of people to sell to as long as they lift them. So there is going to be a change, and so that argument to me is going to fade out, soon, I guess. It'll take time. But this idea that, China will forever want to be the factory of the world, it's going to go overboard, and so you will see changes. This is earth shattering what's happening, and this is why I throw Saudi Arabia in there. Because that's it's not a small thing. All these moves are massive, and again, I call it a partition. It reminds me of Africa, when like the imperial European powers were dividing and sorting what belongs to whom. Except this is not happening in that way, and so alliances are being forged, and so everyone else, like Ukraine, will see two giants fighting each other, and like will be rolled over, basically. Because of their fights. And so when I hear, Ukraine, when I hear Cold War too, right? Like there is this assumption that the Cold War was not violent. It was just tension. I think it's implied when we say Cold War. But there was plenty of blood shed, during the Cold War. There was a lot of proxy wars that, in where a lot of people died, especially in the global South. And so I think there will be an element of that, but inevitably, I actually have a clip that I want to show you, if that's okay. Can I share?
Yeah, I think let me see if I make you share the screen. Hold on.
That if you look at history, could this happen? Well, yeah, we have seen other dominant currencies in the past, right? What the Dutch currency in the 17th, 18th century, the Spanish dollar, then you had sterling, then you had the US dollar. It could happen. It seems that the conversations are there, but perhaps not yet.
Yeah, it took like world wars for that to
right,
change.
World War I, then we had Bretton Woods in 1944.
Don't scare us.
You be careful with that comment, Romain.
Yeah.
So again, at the beginning, I guess a little context, they were talking about the replacement of the US dollar, right? That's what's in the news. You also got to be careful because at some point, they always grab any topic like climate change or anything, and it will make it work for the ends of, the U.S. ruling class. But I do think that's important that, there is a challenge that's going to come to take power from the U.S. And I agree that, Eduardo, like you were saying, that the person you referenced, that there has to be an earth-shattering moment. I don't think it was COVID. I don't think it has happened. I think there will be a head-on conflict. And just like Lipson, you mentioned before, took 2 world wars for the British Empire to recede to the background. It's going to take massive conflict, head-on conflict, to take power from the U.S. because U.S. they stated it on the national defense thing. We will win. They stated multiple times. We are ready to win. They're ready to do anything, including modernizing nuclear weapons. And so this is what we warn about. Like we've also, I think, are detached from the Cold War era, right? Like the nuclear war is like, I think, of the past. It's always been on the table. It's been present in COVID, because we've been fixated on COVID. We think like all this maneuvering has stopped. Even us, we were distracted into fully COVID, but this geopolitical maneuvering has not stopped. Even the vaccines themselves demonstrate this geopolitical wrestling for controlling the world. Just look at what places you can enter with the Russian vaccine or the Chinese vaccine where you can't.
Mm-hmm.
So all this COVID, all this data mining, all this mRNA bullshit, all this is in the context of these people gearing up for war.
Yeah, I wanted to look maybe at one of the sections on nuclear energy and nuclear warfare. So, trying to think, there's a bunch, but I guess, okay, I'll just read one paragraph. This is from the joint statement. So the sides welcome the joint statement of the leaders of the 5 nuclear weapons states on preventing nuclear war and avoiding arms races, and believe that all nuclear weapons states should abandon the Cold War mentality and zero-sum games, reduce the role of nuclear weapons in their national security policies, withdraw nuclear weapons deployed abroad, eliminate the unrestricted development of global anti-ballistic missile defense system, and take effective steps to reduce the risks of nuclear wars and any armed conflicts between countries with military nuclear capabilities. I don't know. I don't know what to think when I read that, right? Because, I mean, obviously my position is abolish nuclear weapons altogether, but I think there's a lot of arguments going on, just in general with regard to what degree like Putin has been provoked in this Ukrainian situation. But it's like all this language about reducing risk and de-escalating and withdrawing, particularly with regard to the nuclear threat. And yet, like, everything's going the complete opposite direction. So I think, that's obviously like the most scary part of all of this, and the prospect of World War III, or like whatever form, that's taking. And then alongside this, I don't know if we want to get into this because we've had a couple conversations about Ukraine, and we haven't, I don't think, touched on the biolab thing at all. And I was thinking about that a lot as I was reading the part in the joint statement where they specifically call out like U.S. Use of bioweapons, right? So the sides reaffirm their belief that the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development of Production and Stockpiling of Bacteriological, Biological, and Toxic Weapons, and on their destruction, a really long name, is an essential pillar of international peace and security. Russia and China underscore their determination to preserve the credibility and effectiveness of the convention. And then later on, the sides emphasize that domestic and foreign bioweapons activities by the United States and its allies raise serious concerns and questions for the international community regarding their compliance with the BWC. Then they talk a little bit about like properly reporting on military biological activities conducted overseas and on their national territory. So like immediately I was thinking about all of the questions around like Fort Detrick. Anyway, I just think that section, obviously, given the last 2 years, like there's a lot of emphasis on bio warfare in particular, like alongside cyber warfare. But I don't know. I mean, what do you guys make of the whole U.S. funded Ukrainian biolabs? Like, how do you see that fitting into this whole conflict?
I want to take on two, because there's 2 questions you mentioned about the nuclear part and the biological part. And in both cases, the Chinese-Russian agreement puts forward the notion that they are a more peaceful, a more sane alternative. Like, look, we don't want nuclear weapons. And we've already given up our bioweapons, right? That's what's kind of implied. And if this U.S. is running mad across the globe with nuclear weapons and bioweapons, which is true. But I will say 2 things I'm going to say one thing about the bioweapons and one thing about the nuclear part in terms of what it means when China and Russia are saying it. First, complete hypocrisy when they talk of bioweapons. Sputnik, Sinovac, all that stuff, mRNA vaccines, adenovirus viral vectors, all of that stuff is the infrastructure for biotech and bioweapons of the future. They all know it. They're all doing it. And it's a race to see who can develop CRISPR, who can develop all those sorts of things. And it's connected to AI, because AI, they believe, is going to be a key feature towards really helping them develop the kinds of technologies in biotech that would be transformative and allow you to win, possibly using with bioweapons. So let me just say that when they say US must disarm, they're being completely hypocritical, because they know they're doing exactly the same thing. They're just trying to get any of their allies to put the same kind of pressure the US is trying to put on China, because US is doing the same thing. Bring down that Wuhan lab, They're trying to get them to say, please let us bring the people who need to look into these labs to see if they're running. China's like, fuck you. No way, because we're running a lab like you are in North Carolina, right? So they all know they're doing it. So everyone's got their hands dirty in China, Russia, and the United States. And it's a race to see who can inject their people and learn from it and build the right weapons to rule the world. In the case of nuclear weapons, I think it's different. I think China knows, they're like Germany was in World War II, prior to World War II. We've got an economic engine that is just going to win this one. And the only thing that could short circuit China taking over the globe economically is the US tilting over the entire board with the nuclear weapons. So in reality, I think China is basically building any pressure they can to get the US to reduce, which it won't, but to reduce the one thing that is going to allow the US to, what I would say, survive this. Meaning the US is going to lose this, I believe, in terms of a straight up conflict. And the only alternative for them is to use the nukes to try to change the game. And China knows that. So I think China is talking out of an immense confidence economically, politically. And so the one thing that could overturn all this is the US using nuclear weapons. And that I do believe that's where this is going to go. And I do believe the US will lose, and I believe they will bomb cities when they are losing. And we've already done it in the last stages of victory, just to basically tell Russia, stay out of our back. That was not about Japan. That was about sending a message to Russia when they nuked Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If they're willing to send a message in the face of victory, what do you think our rulers are going to do when they're losing?
And I think that's also a lesson for China and Russia, or at least China, because China is the big player. That if you want to win, you will have to, do some horrible shit, in order to assert your power. And China is not at that level, to compete with the US. And I think that's where Russia comes in. And I also don't want to make it seem like that alliance is going to last either. Because China is building their own military, their own, they're just buying time. They just want a buddy for now. Because I mentioned this the first time we talked about Ukraine, but I still think this is also about, that alliance is about those northern routes that are going to, shrink the world a bit in order for trade and things like that. As more ice melts, or, some for longer. And Russia has a lot of, that area, and they actually have a lot of experience operating in fucking the cold in defending those areas. And so, again, I'm focusing on the near present, I guess. I don't know how many years, but I'm not fooled by that alliance that's going to last, or, just fucking the Soviets and the US, right, fought the Nazis, and then what happened?
Right. I mean, that's what I was noted. They call themselves the sides. They don't mean the same sides. They mean different sides. So even in the document, they're acknowledging we're only temporary allies here.
I was going to add that confidence that they have, Moscow and Beijing, comes from the geopolitics of Eurasia, right? It's that's on their side. And I made a mistake. I said 70% of landmass. I meant to say 70% of the world's population is in that area. That's what I meant to say. I apologize. Correction. And this is, as well, Ukraine is to Russia as Taiwan is to China, right? And this is they're becoming fed up with the USA trying to meddle in what their own ambitions are, right? For the USA to funnel military support to Taiwan to protect its so-called sovereignty and independence, right? Or trying to do the same with Ukraine, when all of these things are really an expansion either way, whether it be Russia and China, or whether the US does it they did it a long time ago with Mexico, right? And other countries right around them. So, or now externally through NATO, right? As they dominate Europe. So it's emerging as the new centers of global power on this planet. And I think that this is the boldness and the resistance to Washington. And that pressure is marked this year. So it's something to look at. And I wanted to say some other thing to what someone else's point was. It'll come to me when it comes.
Yeah, I think it was a short piece of the Chinese-Russian agreement, but it was pretty like affirm from the Russian side, reaffirms its support for the one China principle, confirms that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, and opposes any form of independence of Taiwan. It's like, why the hell should Russia care about that? It's clearly, these are deals being struck. It's so, it's just like, it really is the language of gangsters. Because basically they're saying, we're going into Ukraine and we're going to crack heads. And China's going to do the same thing in Taiwan. And we're both going to support each other and give each other political cover for doing so. Now, at this point, some people are going to lose their minds and think like, that we're saying, oh, look how evil China and Russia is, and the United. There are no side, and this is the mistake the left makes. The left makes the mistake of thinking that the China and Russia can be a bulwark against U.S. empire. It's like none of these sides are on our side. There is no working class side in any of these people, China, Russia, or the United States. They're all opposed to us, and their operations are going to come at all of our expense. You can really see it in Ukraine, but of course you can see it what's happening in the economy here in the United States. You can see it what's going to happen in the economy in Russia, and you can see it in the dangerous future they have laid out for all of us. So there are no sides to choose from here. That it has to be stopped. It turns out that our job, I believe, in the United States, is to stop our government side. And it's the job of the Chinese working class to stop them, and it's the job of the Russian working class to stop the Russians. But it's I don't know. That was just interesting to me, that one China thing.
Yeah, but both of these just reminded me why states are just so awful. All states, all sides. I had a comment, but Eduardo, did you want to go first?
Well, I wanted to share now the short clip, but you can, or did you want to make
do it? Mine was like a bit of a pivot, so go for it.
Sure. Well, it's the prediction by this professor, and maybe we might even agree to it or not. I don't know, whatever we thought of it. So I'm wondering if I can share.
Yeah, you should be able to share.
This element that permeates the fabric of whole civilizations. World orders determine often the languages people speak, the religions that they practice, the way they work, the laws they follow, and even the games they play. And they are pervasive, and they can outlast the empires that created them. And thus, this deeply rooted form of global governance called world order requires a major cataclysm, a coincidence between some geopolitical change and some catastrophe to uproot them and to give way to a new world order. And right now, we are at the cusp of such a change. And that's what I want to talk about in the prepared remarks I have tonight. So Annika, with that, should I just launch right into my prepared remarks?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, thank you, Annika. Right, when the leaders of over 100 nations gathered at Glasgow for the UN Climate Conference last month, there was much discussion about the disastrous effect of global warming on the environment. But there was little discussion and less awareness of the possible political impact, particularly on the current world order that made such international gatherings possible. World orders, as I said earlier, are deeply rooted global systems that structure relations among nations and the conditions of life for the millions of people that live within them. And for the past 600 years, it has taken a catastrophic event, such as war or plague, to overturn such entrenched global systems. Within a decade, however, climate change will be wreaking a cumulative devastation sufficient to surpass past catastrophes, creating conditions for the eclipse of Washington's liberal world order and for the rise of Beijing's decidedly illiberal one. In this sweeping imperial transition, global warming is catalyzing a veritable witch's brew of change that is eroding America's once unchallenged hegemony and its world system. By charting the course of climate change, we can draw something akin to a political roadmap for the rest of this tempestuous 21st century, starting with the end of US global hegemony around the year 2030, the end of this decade, through Beijing's rather brief world leadership until something like 2050, all the way to this century's closing decades of environmental crisis, which may yet produce a new kind of empowered world order to mitigate, to cope with this global disaster.
So I just have questions around that, because he's talking about how there is a tie to climate change and all of this, right? Let me stop here.
I'm not going to say anything because I'll fucking freak out.
Yeah, I don't know. I could go a lot of directions after that video, but I don't they even say in the statement like, oh, like we don't support whatever interventionism and a bunch of other stuff, like under the guise of green solutions or under the guise of climate change, and yet there's so much crap throughout the whole thing, doing the exact same thing, like just financialization of nature, like full on fourth industrial revolution. There was one line that really got me harder than the other ones. So they say the side strongly support bunch of stuff, blah, 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 and intend to jointly promote the harmonious development of humankind and nature, as well as green transformation to ensure sustainable global development. I don't know what the fuck the development of nature means, right? I mean, I do. It just means financializing everything. I was thinking a lot to both of these, actually, reading both of these pieces about Africa and the role, not just with trade, but just in terms of the importance of that population. It's a growing population, it's a young population, and then also in terms of natural resources. There's so much, so much competition and just desire to control, in a way that maybe like less. We've talked about how it's sort of the same patterns, but they're taking different forms, right? With the onset of increasing technologization and all of that kind of stuff. But, it's also like really old school imperialism in that regard. I think there's also, something to be said for like African leaders trying to develop their own sovereign nations by partnering, getting their oil from whoever they want, right? But, looking at this statement, yeah, it's, I don't know. There's just so much here, like so much like sustainable development language. And so, yeah, going back to the video you shared, Eduardo, I think so much of this really, really, really shitty stuff is going to be done under the name of like green development. Like it's an oxymoron. You can't have green development. You can't have like green industry. It's just not, it doesn't exist. It's a lie.
I was wondering why I wanted to strangle that guy while I was listening to him. And it's because it's the same, what he's doing is the same idiotic mistake that the entire left made over COVID, thinking that the discussion was about a pandemic. The discussion was about something natural. If viruses exist, then it's a virus, or a disease exists, it's a disease. That was the discussion, that was the threat. This guy's not talking about COVID. He's talking about global warming and global changes. He's talking about 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, like the world is being slowly transformed by humans, but he's missing the entire plot, which is not about COVID. It's not about global warming. It's about the US state, the Chinese state, the Russian state. They're going to smash each other. They're going to come to a giant collision because the world does not run by order. It runs on anarchy. It runs on the fight for deadly survival of these big powers for who's going to control the markets and resources, which is explicitly said in the national strategy document and not as explicitly said in the Sino document, but implied in the China document as well. What he's saying doesn't even identify the actual problem we're dealing with. It allows the big powers to get off scot-free and use all sorts of language to confuse us. And for me, there's nothing in his statement other than, oh yeah, this is the other one, other than passivity. And secondly, he's talking about the ruling class like he's smarter than them. And I want to tell you something I believe. I got a PhD, Jessica's got a PhD. I think we're all intelligent. I want to tell you, we are all children in terms of running the globe. We don't know shit about how to run the globe. There are experts in it who are doing it. They've been doing it for generations. They have generational knowledge of how to lie to masses of people and how to run the world. They are not stupid at it. They are 1,000 times better at that game than we are. So the left has made this mistake over and over again. Look at that stupid ruling class. And the ones who are stupid are us, because we are the infants who don't actually understand the game they're playing. And so that was the other thing that I see in that guy's kind of hubris, because we have to understand, we don't know how we know a little bit about what they're doing, but they are experts at what they do. They're not stupid. They're 24/7 thinking about all this stuff. It's their job. They get paid to do it. They have whole institutions. You remember troll farms, Eduardo? You asked me, do you believe in troll farms? Of course I do. It's called NBC, CNBC, CNN. Massive troll farms across the globe, filling us with shit in our brains, and we don't even know it. So this guy thinks they're stupid, and we're the ones getting played. So that also irritates me.
I think a lot of people think the ruling class is stupid because they see, like, the people that we get to see are the puppets. You know, like, we see Joe Biden, who can't string together a fucking sentence. We see Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi, like, clearly drunk or hopped up on some medicine at 10 a.m. in the morning, right? Like, the people that we should be most worried about are not household names. And I think that's part of it. I wanted to just add one thing really fast. With regard to, like, the whole climate change thing. And I totally agree. Like, he wasn't even talking about climate change at all. Like, there was nothing underpinning that, like, nothing real. But if we somehow, by some miraculous luck or fate or whatever, get out of this whole thing without somebody detonating a nuclear weapon, we're still going to have nuclear energy. Like, that, I increasingly hear liberals, people on both sides of the aisle for sure, touting nuclear energy as, like, the one and only solution to climate. And so it's not just like the infrastructure, the mining, all of that shit is totally awful, terrible, for humans, for everybody, right? For the whole ecosystem. But nuclear energy, I mean, it's so fucking dangerous, and they're going to go ahead with that anyway. So yeah, I don't know. It brings us right back to that discussion of, like, this isn't, like, nobody, like, who's part of this is thinking about what's good for actual people, let alone, like, land or birds.
I agree with you that, you know, we're playing checkers, you know, and they're playing chess and at a high level, and, you know, and it is so scary. That's why, you know, when I hear people, especially on the left, throwing the term conspirational theories very loosely, you know, I don't think that's small. that is massive, right? Because we are trying to find what the fuck the conspiracy is here, because there is a conspiracy, and you will have to take, shots in the dark and assumptions, and sometimes correct yourself, like you said, Libson, in a previous episode. Like, sometimes you will be wrong, but like those your theory hold, right? Like how much of it holds together, and does it explain the world? And of course, like we all can be guilty of confirmation bias, right? But that's why we have to have conversations about this shit, to see what other people are thinking, and maybe come to some sort of, because if you just stay in a room and you can make your own fucking story, of course, like it's true, like to you. And so, but I still, even though I don't want to be associated with a lot of people who call themselves Marxists nowadays, especially, and even in the past, because thinking back, and I'm like, yeah, that shit was fucked up, and like this is why I think that went wrong. But again, like what I'm arguing, I think Libson too, and I don't know you guys, but like, is that this world is anarchic competition. No one is driving the fucking bus. Like not one really, it's just fucking greed and violence and coercion, and and we don't get a fucking say. That's the first thing that, if we want to really like learn how to play, what the game is like you gotta accept that, like, we don't have a fucking say. How do we get to have a say? And then going back to what you guys were saying about the environment, like I'm starting to divorce myself from that narrative too, because like COVID has taught me a lot. I've gone through a lot of fucking personal pain, but it's taught me a lot of lies I fucking used to swallow myself. And how like basically every time all these fuckers are on the same page, they're lying to us. And so on the environment, like we talked about technology, we talked about war, like, and this is why I'm also a Marxist, and like like I love nature and shit, because none of these holds without nature, without water, without minerals. And guess what? They're gonna fucking go and get that shit. The people they're not talking about on these documents: Africa, Latin America, parts of Asia. So the war is gonna be for that shit too. It's not, technology just doesn't happen on a fucking internet. Internet needs electricity, needs water, needs all these natural resources. And so, like, and this is a debate that Eduardo and I have had in, on environmental topics. It's like, I am for nature. Fighting against our ruling class is being for nature. Because like I even same thing with the COVID situation. Like I respect what people are doing. People have different angles on where the battle should be fought. But for me, it's like, unless we go for the throat of this system, legislation and appealing to fucking local, politicians, that's just a delay of the game. If you ever watch sports. And I don't know, like, I wish I had better answers as to how, but like, first of all, we have to realize what Libson said. We're fucking little children playing with these fuckers. And we gotta learn their fucking game, in order to find different answers. Because that's what I see, like, and again, I have to be honest with myself. I have to analyze, am I like just justifying my frame of the world? But look at what's happening. We predicted a lot of shit, and I'm not trying to say that I'm right. I want to be wrong, because I don't want that fucking future for us. I want to be wrong, but fucking COVID vaccines, they came. They're not gone. They'll come back. Don't worry about it, because this is about data. The partition of the world happening right now, boldly, the bold challenges to power and the order of things, the destruction of the liberal democracy facade. Like we're entering a new world order right now, a new the way things are done. And so where do we fit in that context? When people rule our lives, and so again, it goes back to me, to us uprising, collectively, and saying, fuck you, we're not playing your games, your rules, we're doing our shit. Because like, again, it's just a fucking insane and scary thing, and we can't pretend to like fucking hide our heads under the sand Well, these fuckers who think they're driving the bus, drive us over a cliff.
I guess, well, first I should mention, I forgot to mention who that was, because I should have said who that was at first. So that was, just to be clear, that was Alfred McCoy, the author and professor of history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I personally I am an environmentalist, but I'm the way that I've now changed, I've changed over how I see we should view whatever we think, however, climate change is being, I have my doubts, but since you've shared with us in one episode, Andy, that we can post in the link below, that climate change is something that is there's a climate crisis because of CO2. I'm not going to argue on that front, but we both agreed in that episode and that there is environmental destruction. And it's, to what level, I'm not sure, but there is a lot of pollution, a lot of contamination. There's a lot of contaminant in our body today. 90% of chemicals that have been discovered. Our body has a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are going on. Clearly, there's something happening. How this environmental catastrophe is being weaponized and politicized in order for it to be used against us is now how I see COVID has been used, right? So I've learned over this past 2 years that the environment climate change, that phrase, the environmental crisis that is happening, can be now used against us. So that is what I'm afraid of. So my way of dealing with the way that the environmental crisis is not going to be, I'm going to go against the lockdowns. I'm going to go against any sort of politicians trying to capitalize on this issue. And that's where my stance is. I threw that in this Alfred McCoy professor because whatever I don't know, I think I was just trying to figure out, so there might be plagues or right, there might be a war, maybe it's climate change, I'm not sure, but the tectonic shifts are going to happen in one way or another through these major events. I don't know if maybe it might be climate change. It might be, it just might be, may not be. Whatever it is, I think we saw in the agreement in this tectonic shift that there is going to be in the technology area, as Kenny was alluding to, that Russia and China are ready to strengthen the cooperation on artificial intelligence and information security. And we're a contribution to that, right? With all of this COVID narrative on shifting from more paper to more data, more reliance on technology, we are a contribution to that shift because they're one of the leaders. I mean, China is one of the leaders on collecting information and data on their people. They have a credit system. And so if we think that's just China, we've actually contributed to that way of, that way of living, that way of society, the 1984 Orwellian society that we keep fearing, we keep talking about, we keep alluding to. And so if this tectonic shift is happening, then I imagine China's influence will be so great that it will affect our culture, our society, our way of living here. Because if wherever the currency is moving towards, whether we, as Kenny showed us in the episode, whether it be the British pound, and first it was a Spanish currency, and then it was the British pound, and then US dollar, right? And now it's the yuan. I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry. And now it's backed by gas, right? And we're seeing these transactions by Saudi Arabia and China. Then, of course, what do we expect? I mean, TikTok it came out of China, and it's one of the biggest influence that we have here in the USA. So I imagine, again, in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to be overtaken by more influence that's happening there. So whatever is happening there is going to happen here, and we should be instead fighting. We should be instead resisting information security and all of this stupid, propaganda crap about what's disinformation and what we should start controlling. And that's how I see us being a part of. It's more of a continuation of other episodes that we've discussed this. I see how important it is for us to keep our voices, and that's a big shift for me. Speaking of shift, right? from how I used to think before. But COVID has really changed me on those positions. So I think we should be fighting on all fronts, and we should be here at home resisting disinformation campaigns, resisting information security, resisting artificial intelligence, resisting all of that in our society here. And it's crazy to think that, oh, well, it's not going to happen. That's something that China does. No, it's their influence is going to get so great, and I'm really hoping that when we have Iversen here for discussion on Mexico and the discussion on what's happening there, I'd like to know what's happening in the background that I'm maybe not privy of myself.
One thing I was going to add was just on the discussion of oil and the petrodollar. Like we talked a bit about Saudi Arabia throughout, but I just wanted to read this really short. This is from Richie Medhurst from Today, I think. More about the Russian end of things. So he says, Russia is now demanding that Europe pay for gas in rubles. Europe gets 40% of its gas from Russia. That's 200 to 800 million euros per day. Putin is basically saying, you want to play sanctions, either pay up in rubles or freeze. This rule applies to all unfriendly nations. Russia published a list of 48 unfriendly states a few weeks ago, which includes the EU, US, Japan, Switzerland, and Norway. These are generally countries that have sanctioned Russia in the last weeks. Putin, quote, now everyone in the world knows that obligations in dollars can be defaulted. It doesn't make sense to deliver our goods to the EU or US and receive payments in dollars or euros. Following Putin's announcement, the ruble is now at its strongest point against the dollar and euros since March 2nd, after plummeting due to sweeping US-EU sanctions. And benchmark European gas prices rose as much as 20% or 21% in Amsterdam. Remember, the US is begging Maduro for oil. It wants the nuclear deal back to get Iranian oil on the market. And then, like we've talked about, Saudis are considering selling oil to China in yuan, not USD. India bought Russian oil in rupees. Anyway, what I was gonna ask, and maybe like, I don't know, some of like Medhurst's framing I think would be kind of in line with this, but like, what do you guys say to people who argue that the US empire is the most evil, destructive force on the planet, and therefore like any sort of dethroning of that empire, even if it's by mobsters or globalists or whatever, it's still like a good thing, relatively speaking. And I'm not saying that's not my opinion. It's not. You're not going to see me like cheering for states, but like I think that's the argument that a lot of people are kind of who are at least closer to us on the political spectrum. So what would you say to that, Kenny?
For me, like that reminds me of the lesser of the two evils argument, like in our election system here. Like again, Lipson has stated that we don't win. The working class doesn't win. We are pieces in their board. And, just like the Ukrainian people were discardable tools in this game, because definitely like the Russians don't give a fuck, but the West doesn't give a fuck about them, because they push, this situation too in their strategic thing. So we don't win. Like, I don't want to be ruled by China. Fuck that. I don't want to be ruled by Russians. Fuck that. But I don't want to be ruled by the fuckers that are ruling me right now. And so, but again, we can't do much about China or Russia. Like, really, we have to focus on our ruling class, who's like, in their role in this fucking game. Like, I don't want to be ruled by them. And like, I don't, the dethroning or whatever, like, I would say that's like, it's going to take a massive fucking bellic event in the world. And like, I guess to go back to that whole talk of how we transition from different empires, right? There's always a massive display of violence to dethrone an empire and displays the latest technologies. That's how I see it. So, and we're at a point where like our technology is so advanced and so destructive that how can you how can you see that someone wins in this one? You know, like, and I do think that the third one would be a fucking like final blow to whatever the fuck organized civilization, I guess, is the best term I can think of. Like, I'm not rooting for China or Russia or the US. Like, fuck them all. Like, you know, and like my only hope is that like we do our part to take on our rulers, so maybe the working class in those countries see what we did. You know, in the necessity of that. But that's, I guess that's my only answer.
I very much agree with what Eduardo was saying, which Jessica, I think is the spirit you're putting in. You are not with any state, right? So I agree with that framing. But
You mean Kenny?
Kenny, yeah, sorry. Kenny was saying that I think Jessica would agree with when she says, I'm not for any state. But I want to put a fine point on it and use the Russian Revolution as an example. And Lenin, and at a time when I think the Bolshevik Party was doing the kinds of things that I think we will need to do as war emerges, which is called revolutionary defeatism. There were Bolsheviks who were in the Russian army who refused to fight and would only be stationed in Petrograd. And this was at a time when Russia was fighting a war with Germany. And those Bolsheviks had the point of like, no, we want our side to lose. We're for our side losing. Because we don't trust the German rulers or the US rulers or the French rulers, but our problem is these Russian rulers. They're the ones who are our biggest problem. So we are going to turn their drive for imperial war into a civil war that will bring down this government and risk our side, quote, losing in that war. It was called revolutionary defeatism. And I actually believe that. I believe what we're going to have to do is play this very dangerous game in the capitalist class is going to be playing a dangerous nuclear war game. And in the context of the US losing, it's going to create opportunities for the US workers to take down its own government. And we're going to be told that we are traitors for that. And we're going to have to say, yes, we are. We want to defeat our own government in this. We want to take it down in the face of our government facing its biggest crisis. Revolutionaries have to be prepared to say, yes, we are traitors to this country. We want to take its government down. We're prepared to lose this war because we think everyone loses if we can carry on with this war. And what happened when the Bolsheviks were successful, that was the way that Russia was taken off the board in the war. And what happened was, though, that Germany said, okay, I'm sweeping into Ukraine and taking it. And they did. And Russia had to deal. It's like, because there were some revolutionaries who said, oh, let's fight the war. It's like, no, we're not fighting other workers. You get to take Ukraine. Revolutionary defeatism. We're out. They lost that notion a few years later when they went into Poland and tried to take it over and revolutionize the workers by bringing revolutionary workers with guns into Poland, and they got smashed. That's not the way to do it. You have to be. I wouldn't call what I'm describing pacifism. I'd saying you make war with your own ruling class and create the defeat of your own country in a war by essentially making a socialist revolution happen inside of it. So that would be my tilt to it, I guess.
I just wanted to add that that's why I see that it's so important for the U.S. to garner support for Ukraine, and so that everyone is on the U.S. side when they do take action.
And this is why I didn't realize this at the time, how meaningful it was when this 2018 document came out and said, we're going away from the war on terror to this war on Russia and China. We're going to move away from war on terror language. I didn't realize that was also a problem for the United States. They might have realized it, but I didn't realize it, because the war on terror with 9/11 and the Twin Towers coming down, which is probably an inside job, and most people believe it's an inside job, and at this point, I'm prepared to believe that no one was able to say, oh, we're not with the US, because everyone had to get behind the United States. China was probably dying, going like, these motherfuckers, we've got to say we're like for them. Russia was probably dying, going, we've got to act like we're for these people, when they knew they all had the knives out for each other, but everyone had to act like we're all in solidarity with the United States. And the United States took it and said, here we go, war on terror, everyone's with us. Are you a terrorist or are you with us? But when the US left the war on terror, it opened them up to this new language that's in this Sino-Russia document, which is, there's no war on terror. they're declaring a war on U.S. authoritarianism, and that's interesting to me.
I want to comment on that real quick too. This language is present in the document of the two sides, Russia and China. They also, just like the US, leave the door open for terrorism, because terrorism is very flexible, right? And terrorism is defined by the people who are the police of the world.
Interesting stuff.
Also, something fast. I was just thinking, there were activists on top of one of the Raytheon buildings the other day, and also I think blockading their parking facility or something. Not enough, but I think that's an example of yes, the US empire and all its allies and different arms must be dethroned, but like you both are saying, Andy and Kenny, it's our job to dethrone it, right? We can't be, as much as when, especially reading these together, right? For me, there is a real sense of any critique of this joint agreement coming from an American, right, has no leg to stand on whatsoever, even if the critique is true. Mm-hmm. But we're not gonna, what is to be gained by villainizing, big bad Putin or China, whoever the villain of the day is, right? Even if they are awful, it's really our job, to take care of our own government and tear it down.
That's why I find it so funny when I do glance at mainstream media, and one angle that is taken to analyze, quote unquote, this moment focuses on Putin the evil, Putin with the childhood problems, Putin with the ideological and historical duty to reinstitute the Russia, and they completely ignore or skip the whole power dynamics happening in the world. And so their analysis is focusing on a person, just like it was with Trump, right? This one person, this one evil Kim Jong-un, this irrational evil people, right? As if we're watching a fucking 1980s Hollywood movie. But it works, because people do pick sides, it's an emotional appeal, it's emotional manipulation. So we can, rally behind Ukraine and the U.S. as the people that bring democracy and order and law and order, all that bullshit. But in reality, there's very few actual intelligent, develop arguments on what's happening. Other than that, is purely emotional manipulation, at least from my angle.
Yeah, and Zelensky too, right? Putin's like a freaking, like you said, 1980s James Bond villain. And then they're holding up Zelensky like he's the golden boy. And I'm hearing, middle-aged women in my town talking about how sexy he is. And it's just oh, it's just a show. It's just a fucking theater show.
They said the same thing about Donald Rumsfeld. Do you remember that?
Oh, did they? Ooh.
Donald Rumsfeld was a sex symbol for a while. He was such a badass around Iraq War.
Oh my God.
Disgusting, man. But I mean, that's the thing though, again, it's I think of a person wearing a sock puppet, you have one hand and one hand here. And we get involved in wondering what's coming out of this sock's mouth and what's coming out of this sock's mouth. And can you believe they said that? Or even trying to assess it when there's a hand behind that we never get to see. And there's a whole institution and there's a whole class behind it that we often don't really get to, we don't get to talk about what's really going on there. We spend our time with these figures, and yet we are claiming that they're the dummies. The weird shit that's coming out of the mouth of the Muppet that we actually pay attention to, we lay claim to saying, what are those idiots doing, as we think that show is somehow showing us what's really going on. And that is where you need That's where it takes conspiracy, because capitalism is an organized conspiracy. They're not going to tell you the truth about how this stuff works. And William Casey, that CIA guy from 1980, said, if we can make sure that everything the US people believe is a lie, then we're doing our job. Like, because they're afraid of us getting any piece of truth. Everything we believe has to be a lie in their mind. That's pretty complete if you ask me.
That's why it's so hard to figure out what the hell is going on in Ukraine, because I just assume that 98% of what I'm seeing, even from independent media, is lies, like, or it's misinformed.
Right.
And even like you were saying, like what we're being shown, but also like the history, I mean, I looking back, like, I just didn't get anything in my education.
Yeah.
I went to nice schools and whatever, progressive teachers, and I feel like I'm just having to make up for lost time, like, in adulthood, because we're not taught anything.
Yeah. And I share with you the notion of, okay, once I accept that it's all a lie, that doesn't then tell me what the truth is.
Right.
That is a challenge. And that is where it requires discussion, and we need a lot of people to be a lot of people who care about the future of the world, who are prepared to pretty much give up, and who are prepared to abandon all the things we're being forced into. Abandon data collection, abandon, this fourth industrial revolution, whatever's being forced on us. We have to abandon all of that and have a discussion amongst ourselves about what do we think is going on.
And I think we need journalists there, like people on the ground, like whether it's this or something else, because I think that, like, just with the censorship of the media and all of that being so centralized, and Assange still being locked up. He got married today, like in a fucking prison.
But I guess I'm speaking of it again more, and I keep on talking about it in these what are semi-mystical, indigenous, but I'm just talking about collective knowledge. I'm not even talking about a journalist per se, but just the notion that people who are truly trying to figure out what is truly going on, getting together and discussing, I believe in that. What that will produce, I believe in that. And I don't know what that is, but that's what I believe in.
And I think this show speaks to that. Like, I have a degree of understanding. There's a lot of blind spots. Like, I couldn't have put this picture of Ukraine when it first started. It would have been a lie. Like, I think we even were like taking stabs at it right in the first episode. But it's taking conversations and events, happening to get a better picture of what's happening. Same with COVID. Like, at the beginning, we were kind of we took that position first, like, no, like, this shit is like, and then at a moment I was freaking out, like, it still wanted me, and then I came back to it. I'm like, no, fuck that, like, bullshit. But again, it takes time, because we are again playing checkers, and trying to figure out how to play, chess. That's a metaphor I use, and so. Again, that's why it's, again, the importance of this show to me is that I've been able to talk to people from a bunch of walks of life, from different angles. I don't agree with everyone, but a lot of perspectives have informed how I, analyze things, right? And I think that is true knowledge, not going to a fucking institution to be indoctrinated with bullshit. Like, true knowledge is conversation, disagreeing, fighting sometimes. Like we've done in this show, and then, but realizing that, we're pointing in the same direction and trying to figure out a similar thing. Because I do think there are fucking lines where like, you're not even in the same ballpark with some people, right? So, that will be important to distinguish you, because you can't dedicate all your energy to some shit that is just like, like, there is no traction there, like, and so. Yeah, collective knowledge. I agree with you, Lipson. And at some point, I guess in the future, we'll also be having conversations with people in other struggles and how they're dealing with their bullshit. But for now, our task is to, not just to resist, is to find a way to fight back, because just holding the roof is fucking exhausting, as we've, experienced.
I wanted to just comment on maybe some of the we're having this discussion, and that's great. But I've been trying to feel my way around some of the liberal circles, progressive circle friends that I have. I think they're just my friends, and they have their opinions. And so I think for me, just listening to what they are saying is giving me, after these conversations and this topic, now I feel I can share with them a different perspective in those circles. When I think of sanctions, for example, it comes up a lot, and how they are a big proponent of sanctions, and they think that that's the way to fight against Putin, against Russia, and what's happening in the Ukraine. And I think that after today's topic, right, that sanctions are actually pushing us further into this tectonic shift of the world power that is shifting now over to Eurasia, because I think sanctions are just motivating China and Russia, saying, you know what, we're too closely tied to them, and this is why we're getting affected. We're going to do our way now, and yuan is going actually to be the most globalized currency. It's going to, because globalization is being weaponized and used against us. And so that's what sanctions is doing. This is what we're pushing more further of that. It's not actually de-escalating. It's not actually stopping them. It's making them further get stronger and realizing they've depended on the USA too long, maybe, and they need to start doing it their way and be them the center powers. And the other comments that I've also heard is about how much Ukraine, they support independentization or free Ukraine. And if that's the case, then you would also be a proponent or a supporter of freeing Puerto Rico, for example, right? Then you would say, okay, fine. Then let's let go of Puerto Rico as well. Let's let go of Western Sahara that is being controlled by Morocco, right? And so why aren't we speaking about that, right? And that's not in the conversation. And then I guess the other thing I also hear is about the refugees and the refugee crisis. And that to me is also disturbing, because a lot of people who think that, oh, well, we should be supporting refugees weren't very, maybe not so much leftist or maybe this is something we need to discuss even amongst our friends who are who think alike around COVID, but they might be more lenient of right-wing politics, and that they think that immigration isn't, like something that we may not be in agreement in immigration, but if they're talking about Ukrainian refugees, I think we should think about refugees in general in the global south as well, right? I mean, not just these refugees in the Ukraine are just as equal, I think, as people in Africa and from people from Latin America who are coming over. We should be giving everyone, we should have a borderless, we should no border stance. And that's how I think of this when I'm thinking about commentary from circles that I'm in, whether it be online or offline, and I listen to friends and community. Don't know if anyone wants to make a comment, but that's it for me. Pretty much wiped out for tonight.
Well, I think it's
They're
good.
mostly white refugees, though, right?
Mm.
And also largely unvaccinated, interestingly, but
we
don't talk about that.
I didn't know that one.
I would just say, Eduardo, I think it's good that you have connections, because I'm not at this point. I'm not talking with any liberals about this. And it's that's just where I'm at, and that's why you do need a group of people to be doing stuff like this, because there are people who I'll talk to, but they're going to be at the farmers market when we're tabling, or there'll be people in the Workers and Students for Choice, and we'll discuss it with those folks. And Brandy and I, and with you all, because currently we don't have a trucker convoy. There's not a working class struggle that I'm a part of that's happening around me, to be able to talk about this in the context of, because if there was working class action against some section of capital here, we'd have to say that our struggle is not just against capital here, but against capital's intentions of using Ukraine as a imperial, plaything. At least that's what I would be saying, in that kind of fight. But I'm not in that fight. So currently, it's about trying to keep my head on straight, trying to be honest about what I think I see. I was really glad that I said what I said about Ukraine way back when, because I feel like it helped me in making a prediction that was really wrong. It helped me say, okay, well, what were the reasons I thought that, so I could rethink this situation. And so for me right now, it's about keeping a community of people who I trust, continue and stay in connection with and discussion with. I know like Jake and I don't agree on NWO, but I'm pushing him on NWO right now. But I'm not, he can do what he's going to do, and he's going to push back. And I want to stay in that place of discussion with him because I trust him as a comrade in the struggle against an overall state. So those are the folks who I'm interested in talking with. And I'm certainly not, Eduardo, in saying that you shouldn't talk. I think all of us have our own architecture around us that we can have these discussions. But struggle-wise, it's more of an idea of struggle than real struggle, And maybe if my school got pushed around a vaccine and we did have to do a civil disobedience, that might produce an opportunity. But right now, it's kind of I'm like Jessica, I keep my head down, don't say too much most of the time, and I try to consider where I'm going to say something, because there needs to be a point for me, other than just creating another conflict, another source of alienation with somebody who I don't need that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still tied to former campaigns. They're not friends. They're just people that we worked together. We did nothing, and living in San Francisco, you just, once I'm online and then once I see them on the street or I see them organizing, and they call me, they ask me to join, I don't want to do anything with them anymore. So, and then that's a conversation starter. Why not? Why don't you want to vote? Or why, like yesterday, no?
Right.
So then I have conversations with folks that I used to be a part of their religion. Or still. All right, let's
full circle. I'm just gonna start selling bunkers. Sorry. The good thing with bunkers is if we have internet, we can still socialize.
I'm in a bunker right now.
Yeah, they have to be in a physical space for that. Right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests in the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what-s-left.whatnot.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, or Telegram, and you can find any of that.
And Rumble.
Rumble, thank you. And Rumble, I'll put that down. You can find any of that in the episode notes to our blog. Again, read it. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca, with co-hosts Jessica, Kenny Cepeda, and Andy Lipson. Thank you all very much. See you all next time. Ciao.
And I was just glad that we're all back again.
Yes.